I do want to make sure that we talk about Grummz and his posts yesterday. Now, he posted, look, we've had Grummz on the show several times. And this was talked about earlier. Someone said, you got to reel Grummz in, right? It's not my job to reel Grummz in, right?
Yeah, it's not.
But he had this post yesterday, and it said, leak. BioWare and EA caught red-handed. Mr. Matty agreement supposedly leaked. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was true. Return to form a required phase. And before I continue that, this is coming off of this that we saw yesterday, where return to form was listed in all of these various reviews, right? Continuing on, content creation guidelines, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so all these things that you're not allowed to talk about. Well, anybody that's ever seen any of this stuff knows that there was a 0% chance that this was true. Like,
bro, the
0.
cursor's at the top left.
Well, regardless if there's a cursor in it or not, this is not the way NDAs look.
It's
ever.
Not.
And Never. Like, I DM'd him and I was like, there's no way that's real. Right. And my thing is, like, you can't just throw this out there. It ruins your credibility. Right. And you can't actually lead with like leak. This is not this is not a leak. This is something that somebody sent you. And I think it's very fair to be critical when somebody makes mistakes. If I made the mistake, I expect people to be critical with me. But I think that Grummz overall has been a very net positive for this. I think he does a really good job of consolidating. Hold on, Alex. I think that he does a very good job of consolidating information into a digestible form, and that's what he's done with his X account. Now, Alex, you disagree.
I think he's been a net negative.
Okay.
I think what happens is that anytime he's attached to something, there's so much baggage with him that it comes around and it literally brings down any sort of even semi-positive movement that is happening towards games. You can make the argument like, oh, we want games to be better. We don't really want to be, force-fed, bad writing, bad games. This is really just like you're trying to satiate a market that isn't there. I mean, a great example is The First Descendant. Right. I never knew, I knew it existed. I didn't download the game until I saw the Freya trailer. Okay. If you look at that trailer, you'll see why I downloaded that game immediately. Because literally a tweet said, we've got cake. And then it's like the most beautifully cyberpunk animated woman in fishnets and there's the biggest butt you've ever seen. But like, it is this thing where what happens is, he makes so many mistakes continuously throughout trying to consolidate data and whatnot that it just does not help any sort of movement that he's attached to, and it makes everyone look like clowns. He did the same thing with Starfield of the start menu, where he called it like some ridiculous word, and it was and then he was like, "Oh, this means that the game didn't have a good development time or cycle." Starfield wasn't great. I didn't like it, but like the start menu is not going to be the indicative factor of this. Right? Like, it's just Sid Alpha has constantly brought out all the things that he's done. Fratanga Plays has done an amazing job as well, a close friend of mine. Like, there's so many things that, although he's categorically putting things together, the problem is that it becomes like, how far in the fringe are you willing to let someone like this impact a scene in gaming, a hobby that many people definitely enjoy, because they have something they want to push. Honestly, I'm going to be real about this. It's two sides of the same coin. You just got retards on both sides fighting for control.
Well, sure.
That's really my take, right? Like how about stop and just make the good video game?
Right. Well, that's the problem, is that overall people aren't making the good video game, right? And I think that, I'm not going to speak for Grummz. I won't speak for Grummz, but I think that in a situation where from my observation, it seems like he got too caught up. And this is one of those things that he received it and he's like, I'm going to get this out there. This fits, this idea of what's been happening. And he put it out there. Now, to his credit, it got ratioed. Colin Moriarty, who was referenced in that with Last Stand Media. I've interviewed Colin before. I had him on the show. He's, Colin, I was talking to him and I was just like, I don't even understand like the whole Mr. Matty plays thing. Like, I really don't even understand the whole controversy behind that.
That was terrible.
Well, and he was like, I don't even understand the controversy. Like Colin's like, I don't even understand what the hell's going on, you know? So with all that said, right, we can't just keep throwing shit out there, even like it has to be vetted, right? And I think the way that this was presented was very poorly. This idea of leak, this is it, you know, and yes, he has a question mark here. That's fine, right? But this is very sensationalism, right? There's a lot of sensationalism in this, and I get it, right? If it bleeds, it leads. I get it, right? But and he says, if true, right? Like I want to be clear, and that's I can guarantee he'd say, well, I said if true, right? But the way this reads initially is that it is true, right? And most people aren't going to get down here. So with all that said, there's been a lot around in this game that when you look at it, regardless of this thing with Grummz, you look at it and you say, that doesn't seem right. There's things about this, right? And going back to that, the idea of return to form, the return to form. This is from Permaband over on X. Says, lurkers, remember when I said on yesterday's stream about how funny it would be if all the game journals giving Dragon Age Veilguard glowing reviews likely got briefed by someone at EA or BioWare for what words they have to include in the reviews. Now, once again, I'm not saying this is what happened, right? And I'm not throwing out this idea that they said this, but with that said, you can go down here and see some of the things that were said. Return to form, return to form, return to form. We talked about that yesterday, and it's in all these reviews as well. You can see it all here, return to form across the board. Well, it turns out it's less than joke than I initially thought. In fact, it may be actually true. And I'm not going to say that far, but the narrative designer for BioWare, who's in charge, who has since gone privated, by the way, which is interesting, said, this is 11, this is a screenshot, says, so 5 years ago when I rejoined the project as narrative director after a hiatus on Anthem, I was asked my goals for the project. And one of those is I want to see the phrase a triumphant return to form for BioWare in at least one review. I think this is just one of those, could be a coincidence. Maybe it just seems odd. And I think it is worth pointing out along the way. I don't know, Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the simplest answer is the best one. I think game journalists are lazy and retarded, and they'll do whatever they want because they don't want to actually write a good review. So if one of them says return to form, oh, that sounds so great, I'll use it too. And they just add it on there. Could they have been briefed? Probably. I think that takes a lot of effort and time, though. More than likely, that tweet got 2.2K likes, and game journalists saw that tweet and they were like, that's a great way to describe the game if it's going to be good. So they just went ahead and did it. They're just sheeple, like so many other people, right? And they're lazy, and that's the issue. I mean, even Matty didn't say that at all in his review. Even I was going to say Shillup. Even Skillup didn't say that in his review. So it's like this. What up, Jesse? It's like this whole thing where I think what happens is a lot of game journals do in fact talk to each other, and they have conversations about games they're reviewing, and then they'll talk about it and they'll be like, yeah, it's this. And they go, oh, that's a good way to describe it. And then they'll do it in their review. More than likely, that's probably what happened. But it's just, it doesn't look good because all it does is show that game journalists don't care about the medium. They don't care about reviews. They don't see them as objective or trying to be as objective as possible. And all they care about is, how do I get this out as fast as possible? And then do that from that perspective. I think personally, a lot of people wanted the game to do well because they either have a political leaning towards something and they want that to be the norm. And I can totally see that 100%. We all have our biases. It happens. The difference is, though, you're supposed to put those to the side and review the fucking game.